Mrs. Smith was lying in the corner of the fireplace, her head at the corner of the hearth. She has two wounds upon her forehead, one producing a fracture of the skull, the other a depression. There were four wounds upon the upper and posterior part of the head, creating one depression of the bone. Suppose the same instrument must have inflicted the wound that caused the death of Alexander. Her dress was bloody down to the waist. Suppose some of the wounds on Mr. Smith's head had to have been inflicted when she was lying down. Her death must have been occasioned by the wounds referred to. She seems, from appearances, to have struggled. There was blood in the middle of the floor and spread to the place where she lay. From their position, I think that Mr. Smith must have been killed first. Alexander lay with his head from the fireplace, his body chiefly consumed up to his third or fourth rib. There were three wounds on his left side of his head, immediately over the lower portion of the cartilage of the left ear, making three holes through the cartilage. Large cut at the interior posterior cartilage of the same ear. The skull was fractured on the top of the head. The wound must have occasioned at death. Wounds must have been inflicted with some heavy instrument like a hammer with a flat end. No appearance of having struggled. I think the deceased must have been lying upon his back when the wounds upon the top of his head were inflicted.
Hi, my name is Ellie and I'm an expert witness on fingerprints. There were many fingerprints found throughout the crime scene in the house that raised questions as to who could have murdered the Smiths. Fingerprints found on the hammer, which was used as a murder weapon, belonged to Henry Bauer. It made sense that his fingerprints were on the hammer because he helped the Smiths with their farm work, so he could have been using the hammer for work on their property. The print found on the hammer matched Henry's left index finger, which was an ulnar loop, and we were able to match 8 minutiae to both prints, so we concluded that it belonged to Henry. There were also fingerprints found on the hammer that belonged to Anton Geisler. He worked on the farm as well, so it made sense that his fingerprints were on the hammer. However, his fingerprints were also found on the east room window, where we assume the murderer entered and exited the house. We were able to tell these prints belonged to Anton because the print on the hammer matched his left index finger, which was a tented arch, and the print on the window was a radial loop, which matched his left thumb, and we were able to identify at least 8 matching minutiae to conclude that both of these fingerprints belonged to Anton. Other prints found on the scene were on the workshop door and the money chest, which both belonged to Alexander Smith, who was one of the victims in the crime scene. The fingerprint found on the chest was a double loop, which matched Mr. Smith's left thumb, and the print found on the door was a plain whorl, which matched to Mr. Smith's left index finger. And after further investigation, we were able to match 8 minutiae to both prints, so we were able to conclude that they both belonged to Mr. Smith. The last print found was on the teacup, and this print belonged